Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Get Real. As you know, this podcast, as you heard in the intro, the biggest purpose of this podcast is bringing on real people to share real stories, because we truly believe that the value is in what people have been through and they've overcome, and we want to share those. We bring the guests on here. That way they can connect with you. And hopefully today you hear, even if it's just one thing that you hear that either gets you through your day. Maybe you're driving in the morning, maybe you're even listening to this in the shower like I do, or maybe it's at night before you sleep. But hopefully you'll get something out of this story. Today I have somebody who actually is a very big advocate here in Jacksonville and St. Augustine. If you're here, you know who he is, because this is somebody that I've watched personally. And there's a lot of people in the programs of recovery that always bring this guy's name up. You hear him in meetings literally across the town, and they always talk about when I met Jeff. So today you get to meet Jeff, man. Jeff, what's up, brother? Thanks for being here.
What's going on, Joe? Thanks for the invite, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here today, bro. And what's cool about this is I haven't heard your story. So I'm actually excited to hear a little bit about your story. I know we've connected because, you know, you were operating at a program here, and I'd sponsor guys, and we'd connect a little bit there.
That's right.
But man, you actually are somebody who's well known here, brother. And I have to say that, you know, for people who don't know you, is right now, obviously you'll talk about what you're doing, but so many people use your name and how much you've helped them. And that's inspired me, because I know as we're going through this path and we've had our past, we want to put our stamp in the world, and we want to help as many people as we can. And when I hear people talk about your name, I'm like, dude, that's awesome, because you help one guy, and then I hear that guy talk about, oh yeah, Jeff helped him, and then he helped me. So you're putting your stamp on this world, bro. I want to tell you that to start off, man.
Well, I really appreciate that, Joe, and that's how this works, right? We give it away to keep it, right? It's like if we have the privilege of being asked to speak at a meeting, right? I always say the same exact prayer. First, I pray with my wife, and then I'll run to the bathroom before I go speak, and I say the same exact prayer. I always say, God, please just let one paragraph, one sentence out of that paragraph, one word out of that sentence transfer to at least one person, and then they get it and they give it away. Because let me tell you, and you know, everything we hear in these rooms from anybody, they got it from somebody. Mm-hmm. They got it from somebody. They got it from somebody. In other words, I didn't make anything up. Yeah. Right? So I'm just, carrying the message, and hopefully somebody will carry that message and carry that message.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's all God. It's all God.
And that's the beautiful thing about the program. I was saying this other day, like, as crazy as it sounds, I'm so grateful that I'm an addict. Because like what's crazy is this is what it taught me. Like I never before was thinking, oh, let me go help people, let me do this. But then when I was put in a position to realize how beautiful that is, to actually, like you said, you walk into a room and sometimes you say something, they're like, where'd you get that from? I'm like, dude, I don't know. I don't know where that came from. I must have heard it from somewhere.
Well, that's the funny thing. I'm an alcoholic and an addict, right? And what does an addict usually want? An addict wants more. Yeah. Right? So when I started getting that feeling of helping others and seeing that light switch turn on, that became my addiction, like very early on in sobriety. There's no better high than helping somebody else and seeing them get out of that pain, because we know what that pain was. That's right. We were hopeless. We were spiritually, physically, mentally broken. And the good part about being broken is that you can be repaired. And we know that. Yeah. And seeing men and women get repaired is just, again, it's all God. We're miracles, right? Yeah. We're miracles.
Yeah. I got goosebumps when you said that, because I call it the dope. That's my dope now, you know. Yeah. And even my wife, like, she's in recovery, and we own a business, we have kids, so we stay so busy. And she knows when I come home, she's like, hey, what'd you do today? I was like, oh, no, I just met up with John, and then we hit a meeting over here at Java, and then I met up with Dylan, and she's like, yeah, I see that light on you. And it doesn't matter what I'm going through that day. It's like when you do that, that's the dope, man. So let's talk about that, because that's what you're doing now. So tell us a little bit we'll get into a little about your story, but tell us what you do now, who you are, a little bit about Jeff.
So I'm coming up on 7 years working in recovery. That's my career. And I'm about 1 year, November 16th will be 1 year that I am what's called an Alumni Coordinator at Lakeview Health here in Jacksonville, Florida. We're the largest rehab most well-known rehab here in Jacksonville. I actually work across the street from Lakeview Health at Stepping Stone, which is Lakeview Health, except we're the smaller facility. We are co-ed at Stepping Stone, 0 to 21 days, kind of in and out. You know, not all the insurance takes at Lakeview, so thank God we have a place like Stepping Stone. And the cool thing is, Joe, that I'm an alumni of Stepping Stone. That's where I learned about sobriety. Oh, wow. I went there in 2013, 10 years ago, January. Wow. You know, that's where I learned about it, you know, and I was there for about 37 days. 37 days. So one of the joys of my job is I get to work with a team of people. My last job, I ran this big Alcoholics Anonymous clubhouse here in Jacksonville, the largest one, and I was the only employee for almost 5 years.
Yeah.
Working like 50, 60 hours a week, doing these events, fundraising, going back at night because 23 men lived there, right?
Right.
In these 3 little halfway houses. A guy ate another guy's cereal and get called at 9 o'clock. They want to kill each other, and I'm leaving my wife, I'm leaving my family, the phone's off the hook, all this other stuff. I had nobody else there to help me, and now I have a team of people.
Yeah.
And it's not just the clinical team and the medical team. I actually have a team of other alumni and aftercare coordinators and a fantastic director of the aftercare and alumni program there. We all get together, and I'm the only alumni coordinator at Stepping Stone. So I do things like I'm a certified recovery coach, peer specialist now, right? I do recovery coaching. I have groups. I do optional meditation with the patients. We set up our patients before they become alumni on contact forms, man, right? So in other words, a day before each patient leaves Stepping Stone, I have that patient in my office, and I ask them what their preferred method of contact is: phone call, text, or email. And if they say email, Joe, I'm throwing them out my office, okay? Because I want to be personal, right? So at 2 days, 2 weeks, 1, 3, 6, 9 months in a year, I reach out to every single man and woman who left, and if they say phone call, they don't answer, then I move to text, right? Mm-hmm. And we have our own private Facebook group with over 25 active members, alumni. From Lakeview and Stepping Stone, because we've been around for 20 years. We have our own private free app. We have meetings with them. We have alumni events with them. Yeah. So we're not that facility that just says, okay, here's your freaking certificate, good luck.
Right.
We stay in touch with our alumni. Mm-hmm. We show them that you can have fun in sobriety, man. So it's just, and you know what? It's 40 hours a week. I'm present with my family. Yeah. It's been the greatest year of my sobriety.
That's awesome to hear.
Year.
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on what you just talked about right now about, because I think even in recovery, so some people listen to this, they're either in recovery, and this is what I believe. It's it's not just the people, I think we have value to give to people who are even not in recovery, because in recovery, we're learning how to deal with life on life's principles. And we both know that drugs and alcohol were just our solution to our problems. And there's a lot of people out there that can get value from people who they were going towards drugs and alcohol for the solution to their problem. And maybe someone listening to this right now, they're not using drugs and alcohol, but they're using something else. And we can maybe provide them hope. And what I wanted to ask you about was what you were just talking about. And we'll get into your story, but you said something about when you were working at the other place. Your passion is to help people.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of people, especially if you're listening to this, you want to help people because that's what we're about. We're about helping people. But you were at this place and, some people are helping people so much that they're like, oh, how do I balance this, right? Because, okay, I got these sponsees and, even my wife, she's got 2 kids, she's got a couple sponsees, and she's like, is it wrong for me to say I can't? I can, where's the balance? And you were just talking about that. How was that like for you, going through that? You have a family. Tell us a little about your family. You're married, kids?
Yes, I am married. I just celebrated 1-year marriage on September 25th. She's my best friend. I'd known her from the first day that I got sober. She's 12 and a half years now clean and sober, about to become a nurse. I have 1 kid. He's my son, Ashton. He's on the spectrum for autism, and 3 stepkids, 5, 7, and 9.
Yeah.
And the girl is 7, the only girl, and she runs the show, let me tell you.
Yeah, I got 2 of them, I know.
Yeah. We bought a home 2 years ago, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, and, my mom, who was my enabler, right? I mean, I've pushed my mom, literally. I've cussed my mom, kicked her out of the house when I brought girls home, right? Yeah. And I knew I could get away with anything. I moved my mom out of Queens, New York 2 years ago. She has that 4th bedroom.
That's
she
awesome.
Never has to pay us a penny.
Wow.
Right? We take care of mom.
That's dope.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's good stuff.
So you have a family, you got kids, and then you just said obviously working in the program you're at before at the club.
Right.
It was you're loving it because you're helping people, you're doing this stuff, but all of a sudden it almost became like it was too much. Where was that point like for you? Because was it you were looking for somewhere else? Because I know now we want to help people, but we're also like, well, how do I balance that stuff? What was that like for you going through that?
So I guess I took over that place in August of 2017, right? And when I took over that place, I'm, a little over 4 years sober, right? I had just come from River Region. That's where I started my career in recovery. I was a BHA. They made me the office manager. And I came there and I wasn't spiritually fit. My story for the first 4.5 years of recovery was I wasn't going to work any of these steps with God because I'm Catholic. I had that contempt pride to investigation. I was stuck on this religious thing, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to explore spirituality. So when I take over that club, I just want everybody to like me. I want everybody to be like, yo, Jeff Deck, he's awesome. He's doing this. He's doing this. He's doing this. And I'm spending extra time away from the family because I was to my third ex-wife. Long story with all my ex-wives, right? And I'm like having to run back there, right? I'm stressed out. You know, I'm doing all these new things as the only worker and all this. I was coaching sober softball that had started in 2014. We had 4 teams going, and I want to take full control of that. And then in that same time span between August 2017 and January of 2018, my best friend Gene, who's the godfather to my son, he drank and passed away. That sober softball team, all those teams kind of disintegrated down, large part because of my control issues, you know. And then ex-wife number 3 walked out the door, and I got brought to my knees because I was devastated, right? I was in emotional pain when all this happened, and I realized I needed to make a change. And I knew what it was, Joe. I knew I wasn't seeking this whole God thing because I was sponsoring a man who's almost a year sober, and he's in these rooms sharing about God, having this spiritual awakening. You know, God bless him. I'm still sponsoring him today. He's getting married in 2 weeks, 5 years sober, right? And I'm like, I want what this guy has. I'm almost 5 years sober. He's like 1. And, you know, I wanted that. I saw the happiness in people. And what I did was I switched sponsors to a man who had a ton of sobriety and a ton of sponsees, and I saw him every single day. And I said, man, I was like, how can I grow spiritually? And he asked me what I was doing. I said, nothing. And I literally started doing what I was taught at Lakeview Stepping Stones, what I was being told to do for those first 4.5, 5 years of my sobriety. I literally started doing it. Yeah. I started praying in the morning, praying at night, whether I believed it or not, I don't know. I set my clock for 2, started praying then, and believe it or not, I found out I had character defects. How about that? Then I started working on those, and you know, Joe and Charlie, right?
Yeah.
You know, they talk about it, man. I can't explain how it happened, but I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. Yeah. Because I started doing all the steps. Yeah. Right?
Would you say that you replaced, so, you know, like we were talking about, was drugs and alcohol were our solution to our problems. So then, you know, we come into recovery and then we find the new dope, right, which is helping people. And I actually relate to what you just said because I remember, you know, when I first started sponsoring guys, you know, I was sponsoring these 3 guys and I took so much pride in like, I'm going to change their life. I can't wait till they pick up their 1-year chip. I want everybody to say, man, Joseph sponsors the most people, the most successful people. He's the most impactful people. What I found, and I don't know if you relate to this, you could add to it, was what I was doing was I was putting what I wanted out of them. It was like I wanted validation that I was good enough. Sure. I wanted validation I was significant enough because I worked the steps, but not almost, I had the spirituality, but I almost feel like I was working the steps because I still was trying to learn to love myself. But what I was doing, not authentically, I was actually trying to love myself through the result of what other people were doing.
Yes.
So drugs and alcohol became the solution to my problems because I wasn't okay with me. And now I just replaced that with, well, if I can just help as many people and be the most significant person in the world, then that'll be enough. And then 2 of the guys that I was sponsoring end up overdosing and dying. And I stopped sponsoring guys for a whole year because I said, I don't want to do it anymore because I put all that pressure on myself. Like, I don't want that pressure that if like, was there something I should have said to them? Was it this? And then it was somebody that said something to me. They said, Joseph, here you go playing God again. When was the last time you really went through these steps, man? Right. When was the last time you really looked at yourself? Because you're out there trying to go to these meetings and speak at these meetings and do all this stuff. Why are you doing it for you or other people? Right. And man, that hit me like a shot. And then I realized I just replaced, like, helping people can be a good thing. But if I'm doing it for my own, to like replace God.
Motive.
That's right.
Right.
It's my own motive that, okay, if I help you and you stay sober, I'll feel better. But today, with the great part, like what you just talked about, is we're replacing that with, I'm just doing God's work.
That's right.
You know, I'm just doing God's work. Did you feel like you were doing the same thing?
Yes. So that's what happened, right? So I switched sponsors, right? And I start working on myself. And it took about 6 months for all this spiritual stuff to start coming to me after I switched sponsors. So I would say by like end of 2018, I started feeling really good and really different. What happened to me was I started learning humility. Right? A lower modest viewpoint of oneself. Because I was trying to make it all about me, like you were just talking about, right? And then I would say, let me see, I left that job in November of 2021. I would say in the beginning of 2021, I started seeing things that I did not want to go back to. I knew I was going to fall back into that old kind of way by certain people that I was hanging around, certain things that started happening inside the sponsor and the sponsorship family that I was a part of. I started getting in the middle of, and I didn't like what I saw there because I wanted to keep principles. So what I started doing was I started getting concerned, right? I would talk to my wife about it. Again, she's 12 years sober. I would talk to two of my best friends who are sober men about this, and I was praying. I was praying because the new board of directors, they wanted to change everything when everything was going great. We had done so much there, built it and they just came in and they wanted to change everything. And it went against all my principles, right? And I felt that if I would have stayed, I would have became the Jeff from when I started. Okay? Yeah. Because then I would have been people-pleasing. I would have been going against my principles. I would have been putting a human being or human beings on a pedestal as higher power instead of God being my higher power. And I felt almost like a collapse coming. Although I was going to like 12 meetings a week, being asked to speak places, there was no self-care for me. Yeah. I would go fish every now and then, but I would still be thinking about the job. The phone would still be ringing. And I felt that coming. And I was asking for help, asking us to hire somebody else, and they just didn't. And I did not want to experience an emotional bottom. It tells us in the 12 and 12, right? Do you remember what it feels like to be hungover? Yeah, there's something worse, an emotional hangover. And I had that at one point in my sobriety. I didn't want to experience that again, and I knew it was coming because of my experience I had. Yeah. And I like to say, as insane it would be with my story, any of our story, to take a drink and a drug again, for me, it's almost equally insane to stop working the steps. Yeah. But because that's the danger, right? I'll get drunk in the head. I'll get drunk in the mind, get drunk in the head before I take a drink. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's
just the result. The drink just the result of the lack of spirituality, the lack of self-care. And what's amazing about, I think about this as you're sharing, we think, at least for me, when I first came into the rooms, I thought as long as I'm sober, that's all I cared about. As long as I'm sober. So even though my first year was actually the best, it was the second and third year that I stopped doing it. Even though I was sober, I was like, what's the difference? Right. What's the difference? Because, okay, great, I'm not turning to a drug or a drink, but when I lay my head at night, I'm still pissed off at some people. When I wake up, I don't have this peace and serenity that I had before. So even in my mind, I was like, it is insane to take a drink, but it's almost insane the way I feel right now. That's right. That's it almost felt equal. I was like, okay, if I go out and drink and use, I just changed my sobriety date, but the feelings I have are almost like the same as I remember thinking. It's like the same as I had before, where I have this irritable discontent. And that's the message that's what I'm trying to point out is like, okay, yes, we're not using drugs and alcohol. We removed the solution. That's right. But now the work comes. Now we actually it's every single day that we have to continue to do something, because the reality is I might turn to maybe not drugs and alcohol, but I could easily turn to other things that make me feel better. That's right. Buying stuff to look better, pornography, maybe my wife's validation, and all of a sudden I replace drugs and alcohol with something else instead of God.
That's right. And we got like 5 topics out of what you just shared. Right. Right. I mean, alcohol and drugs are only mentioned in the first step of AA or NA. Right. That's for a reason. 2 through 12 fix the problem. The problem is me. I don't know how to live life on life terms. Yeah. Isn't that ironic that alcohol? So I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And I'm like, I want to stop drinking. I want to stop drugging. Now what? I have all these character defects that I needed. I needed my character defects to survive when I was in my disease. I needed to lie. I needed to cheat. I needed to con. I needed to manipulate. I needed to sleep around. I needed to tell you things to get you to like me, to get what I wanted. I needed all these things. I needed to do these things to survive out there. Yeah. But I still have them when I stop drinking and drugging. So what am I supposed to do about them? And that's where the steps come in, 2 through 12. My problem was, how am I going to grow, right? Grow if I'm not working, or I should say I'm only working 5.5 steps. Yeah. So I'm skipping steps 2 and 3. Steps 4 and 5 saved my life when I did them. But I'm not doing 6 and 7 because God has mentioned I have great 8 and 9 step stories, right? My step 10, Joe, was I'd call you an a-hole and then immediately apologize. See, I'm working step 10, promptly, right? I ain't working step 11 because there's no 3, and I'm only working one part of step 12. I'm helping somebody.
Yeah.
And I, just like you, I could relate. Irritable, restless, discontent, not knowing why. I got sober. I was married to my second ex-wife, right? My son's mother. I didn't want to make love to her. I didn't want to hold my son. My head is elsewhere. It's racing thoughts. How you doing, Jeff? I'm doing good, but I was dying on the inside.
Yeah.
Not telling anybody. Just showing up. And the thing that kept me sober in the first couple years of my sobriety was just showing up to these meetings. And I'm not even talking about going in the meetings. I'm talking about hanging out before the meetings, hanging out after the meetings, going out to dinner. That's the stuff that I did, laughing. Yeah. I had this feeling, maybe, and I thank God, right? He put me in Jacksonville, Florida. That's all God. I knew nobody here when I was here for 3 years before I got sober, and I was an isolated drunk for the first time in my life. Mm-hmm. And when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and I met these men and women and they were laughing, I wanted that.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn how to laugh and have fun while I was sober, and I learned pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And that's what kept me sober. But again, it's the internal stuff, man.
Yeah.
I was dying on the inside.
Right, yeah. And what's crazy, you're talking about, like, even though you were laughing on the outside, you were sad on the inside. It's like, man, how do we, I always say we, but even me, and it sounds like for you too, it's like, and that's what I even did when I was getting high. What's crazy is when I used to get high, nobody knew. Like, I was dating a girl for 3 years. When I got arrested, she was like, what the heck? I was like, don't worry, it's an accident. She believed it because she was like, what's going on? Why would they arrest you? And they said you were doing drugs. I was like, no. Like, it was such a shock because for me, all I cared about was if you guys thought I was doing good, then I'm good.
Yeah.
If I lay my head at night and I'm depressed and I'm sad, don't worry. I got drugs to numb that. But if y'all think I'm doing good, then I'm good. So I didn't really care what was going on the inside. And I remember when I first went to treatment, the first guy that asked me, he was a counselor. He said, who are you getting sober for? I said, my family. He said, wrong. I said, no. Right. He said, no. You got to get sober for yourself. And I was pissed. I was so mad because I was like, you don't understand. I'm getting sober for my mom and dad because they've been through so much. I want them to love me. I want them to have a good son. And I didn't listen to them because I was still getting sober for them. And when I got home, they were so easy to manipulate. They were so proud of me. I was like, oh, they're proud of me. And I'm getting high. Okay. So I can get high. And as long as I can keep them proud of me, I get what I want.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Because I need the validation from them. I didn't care about the inside stuff.
No. And we're chameleons, right?
Oh, man.
Man, we're chameleons, and if I could tell you a quick story, right?
Of course.
So if you can't tell, I'm not from Jacksonville, Florida. I was born and raised in Queens, New York, and for the first 12 years of my life, I legitimately thought I was Italian. I'm not Italian. It's because I grew up in the neighborhood right next to where John Gotti was, right?
Yeah.
So I'm acting like I'm Italian out there, right? And then I was the athlete. I was a basketball star growing up, right? And then when I started drinking and smoking weed when I was a senior, it took me a long time to get going. I'm hanging out on the corners drinking 40s with the basketball team members who are black men, passing blunts, and I'm acting like I know how to freestyle. So now I'm going to be the next rapper, right? And then I start getting all these jobs. I've had 74 jobs, Joe. 74 jobs, dude. Right? That's alcoholism, right? I became good friends for about 6 years with a group of Trinidadians and Jamaicans, right? And I'm hanging out with them for a good 6 years. Now I'm disguising my voice to talk like them. Blood clot, boomba clot, praise Jah. This is how I'm talking, Joe, right? And then I became the club kid, so I got a whole different outfit, dyed my hair, man, got a drawer full of tongue rings, weed t-shirts. I'm up in like club exit with glow sticks, acting like I know how to dance. So I'm all of these things. I'm disguising who I am, right?
Yeah.
And then I get into sobriety. Who the hell am I?
That's right.
I'm clean and sober for the first time in my life. I don't know how to act.
Yeah.
Today, because of God and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yo, I'm just Jeff Deck. I'm an alcoholic. I'm another bozo on the bus, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to come to terms and to realize that, man.
Yeah. What a gift it is to realize it, bro. It is. I moved from Detroit to Florida, and that's where my alcohol started. When I came here, very similar, man. I was just sharing this the other day. It was like, when I got here from up north to down south, these dudes are talking about hunting and driving trucks, and I was like, I would Google stuff and find stuff, like, okay, I'm gonna talk like this guy, and the guys who wore long t-shirts, I'll be like them. And what I always say is because I didn't know who I was, and when I thought I knew who I was, I didn't like him. So I was like, if I just be who you want me to be, that'll be okay. And now all of a sudden I start getting high and I'm still don't know who I am. So I become a thief. I do this.
That's right.
And then I go to prison. And now I get out of prison like, okay, now I'm still looking for that identity. You know, my identity was always found in other people instead of really looking inside to figure out who I am. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about, you know, kind of before. Obviously, you talked about, you know, a little bit about how you know, a little bit about your addiction, and then how you came to terms to saying, hey, this is enough, man. I gotta change.
So I mentioned I had 74 jobs, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing right there, right? So I lived in the same house until I was 17, and 45 now. Since then, I've lived in over 40 different addresses. Wow. Okay, I've lived in 5 states. I was homeless in Times Square, 3 ex-wives. That's alcoholism and that's addiction, right? I mean, I started with the drink, right? And then I graduated to weed, and then I graduated to mushrooms and acid and snorting ketamine up in the clubs and mushrooms. And then I graduated to cocaine. You know, the only thing I never did was put a needle in my arm. Thank God, right? But I was just scared to death of needles.
That's how I was.
I was just scared to death of them. The choice was there. I've smoked crack. I mean, I've done it all. I've pushed people away. I mentioned that I had this group of Trinidadian Indian friends. I mentioned I had this group of basketball players of friends. I had the group growing up of Catholic schoolboy and girl friends. I had all these groups of friends because I would run from one group to the next because they would get tired from me, right? Mom throwing me out. I mentioned she was my enabler. Mom taking me back. Moving into my brother's and him not letting me back in. Robbing my brother, getting on a bus when I lived with him in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He was a Marine, right? And then being homeless in Times Square, right? At 74 jobs, because I was that guy who pretty much robbed and stole from almost every single job in my disease. Yeah. You know, I've been fired from one job, Joe. And that was in sobriety because I lied about something falling off a truck back in 2015. Because I was the guy who got paid on Friday and just never showed back up. Or I knew they were going to catch me stealing something, so I just got out of there real quick, right? 74 jobs, 9 of them have been in the wine and liquor stores. You know, 3 of them have been in the restaurant business. I helped somebody with escort driving. I got a lot of stories there. That was fun, right? So, I mean, my disease brought me to all these places. All these, waking up in hospitals, strapped down, charcoal all over me, you know, winding up in ERs left and right. I mean, we've all got those stories, right? And then I conned a woman when I had torn my Achilles tendon, Joe, in 2009 playing basketball. And I made up a Facebook account, right? And I met this woman online on Facebook that I had gone to Catholic school with, and I conned her into letting me come here for 2 weeks in the beginning of 2010. I stayed 2 months. I went back home, packed my stuff. I've been here since, right? Yeah. That poor woman, that's ex-wife number 2. You know, that's my son's mother. And she's a fantastic woman. Yeah. What a great mother she is and all that, you know, and you know, I drank and I would run away from the family. I almost missed my son's birth. She was admitted to the hospital, 2 weeks prior to birth with preeclampsia. I don't think I visited her once. I made it there just in time for my son to be born, taken off in hotels. She wanted her pain pills after her C-section. They were gone. That's the person I am in my disease. Yeah. You know, that's who I am. And we took a trip back to her family's house in New Jersey for Christmas is 2012, and we went to her sister's house for a Christmas party. And she's Puerto Rican, so it's a big family, right? Yeah. And they make these coquino or coquito or something drink, right? They all bring it for contests, and she asked me not to drink. That lasted about 5 minutes. And I started drinking on December 24th, 2012. I did not stop drinking or using until she picked my butt up from Sin City, Arlington, in a crappy hotel and dropped me off at Stepping Stone Lakeview on January 23rd, 2013. Wow. And I could remember getting that first white chip that next night in rehab at a 7 p.m. meeting with Debbie G from the St. Nick's group. I love Debbie. She's over 30 years sober, possibly 40, and she's just an amazing woman. She started talking about those steps, and the only thing I knew, dude, was like Sandra Bullock, 28 Days, right? I didn't know nothing, right? And I was looking at that wall, Joe, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool. Well, there's a lot of God on there. I've already got those steps down pat, so I can't wait to do step 9. I can't wait to say I'm sorry. This is what I know now today, right? I'm a professional manipulative apologist, right? I like to say, does this sound familiar? I'm sorry It's not going to happen again. Give me one more chance. It'll be different this time. I just need $20 for food, right? I mean, here's the thing. My family and my friends, they were done with the talk. They want to see me walk the walk, right?
That's right. They've heard it.
Yeah, man. So I got out, and my son's mother, my second ex-wife, man, she was Navy at the time, reserve, and I made it 4.5 months. 4.5 months for the first time, my first shot at sobriety, right? And I got a sponsor. I'm going out to the beach, even though I'm on south side of town, Joe, because that's where all the cool kids are, right? That's where the young kids are. That's where the kids from rehab are going. Yeah. I got a sponsor who had 40 years sober, so I could tell you he had 40 years sober. Right. I'm legitimately lying to my sponsor. I told him I slept with a nun in my fifth step. I never slept with a nun.
That's funny. I did that. I lied to my first sponsor. I was like, oh, he wants to hear some crazy stuff. I'm going to make up some stories to make him think I'm doing right. That's crazy.
Man, isn't that crazy how we roll, right? Man, I went into Penman Road and raised my hand for a topic of a meeting, and it never happened, and I shared something like I was working like step 10, and it was all a lie to get people to like me, and guess what? It worked. They came up to me after the meeting and like shook my hand. You're doing great, right? When I got sober again after I drank, I had to go back and make amends to that meeting. That's a whole nother story. It was scary, but I did it, right? So anyway, she went away for 2 weeks on a trip to Hawaii, Navy Reserve training mission. I made it about 5 days before I bought that 30-pack and half a pint of E&J. And, you know, my son is almost 2 at the time, and my stepson was gaming. He was like 10 or 11. We had 2 dogs, 2 cats, a guinea pig, a ferret. It was a freaking zoo up there, right? It was like a small 2-bedroom apartment in Bay Meadows. And, man, I put that E&J in my mouth, Joe, and I swished it around. And I can remember thinking, I'll be okay. I'll just have a couple. Nobody's going to know. And what preceded the next 6 days, I am not proud of, but I never want to forget it. That's the stuff that keeps me sober. I mean, I had people over that house shooting up, drinking, drugging. I don't know how I got my son dressed. I don't know how I fed him. I don't know how I got him to his freaking daycare, if I got him to daycare. That dogs were pooping all over the rug. I wasn't cleaning it. Stepson was taken off. Who knows where he was? He was coming back. He had taken my wallet, so I didn't have any money at one point. I called the fire department. I sent him away. Handed my son off to a neighbor once. And I woke up pretty much almost dead up in Shands with IVs coming out of my body. And I said, I need to call my wife. They said, we did. We don't know if she's coming for you. And you know you can't scare an alcoholic and addict. And that was the first time I was legitimately scared. And I was in that ER for a good 5-6 hours before she came. God bless that woman. And I can remember saying, Joe, damn, they were right. I could remember laying there. Damn, they were right after 6 days. You know, they were right what they taught me at Lakeview and Stepping Stones. They were right what they were saying in this meeting. I can't no more. Yeah. And I went and picked up that last white chip on June 14, 2013, and what a ride it's been.
Man.
What a ride.
It's crazy as you say that. You know, I think about how some people, especially me, I was that person, and we watch them in recovery, is I had to go out and figure it out myself to see if you were right. You know, I had somebody one time challenge me. You don't think, because I had a problem that I wasn't an alcoholic. I did drugs, man. I'm not an alcoholic. You guys keep talking about drinking. And there's somebody, I won't say his name, but he's still in the program. He told me, he said, go try some controlled drinking. Oh, boy, I challenged that man quick. I said, oh, okay. So you're giving me okay, I will. He said, go to the bar and have 1 beer for 30 days and see if you can do it. And I did it to prove to him that I could do it.
Right.
And then I said, these guys were wrong. They talked about all this stuff, and look at me now. And then before you know it, I don't even remember how it happened. I felt like a robot. But all I remember this day is I pulled out of the drug dealer's house, and I said, what the hell am I doing? I got out of prison. I'm on probation. I'm leaving the drug dealer's house. But I'm not going to give into these thoughts. I got this. You know, that's a lot better than I need to get help. I got this. You know, what was it like for you as you were talking? It's crazy how I relate so much to your story. Even as I do this, I mean, we all relate, right? They're all the same, but it was like I had to go out there, and then I got to this place sitting in a 10 by 10 cell, 26 years old on January 24th, which is my sobriety date. And this guy I'm getting high every day in prison. He looks at me, goes, you're going to be just like me. And what I relate to is what you just said. For the first time in my life, I was scared.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I said, I don't even know when they let me out of this cell, if I get into this prison, they're going to drop me back off in the prison. And I got 4 months left of my sentence. I don't even know if I'm going to stay sober, because I want to, but I don't even know if I can. And for the first time, I was like, okay, Joseph, you think you can have everything? This is one thing you can't. And I did what you did. I got on my knees and I turned to a higher power. And I needed that, because you and I are very similar. We want to attack everything and we're going to go do it. But one thing I know I can't do on my own. Somebody said this to me yesterday. Don't you think it's a good trait that you everything you have in your life, you're like, I can handle that. I said, it's not, because now I try to play God. And if I try to handle it, then where's God?
Right. And today, and again, it took me until about year 5, right? I asked for help today. I asked for help at work. I asked for help at home from my wife. I asked for help from my sponsor. I asked for help from my sponsees. I tell people how I'm feeling. I do not go to bed holding anything. Things pop up. They pop up, but I have to address them.
Yeah.
I have to, man.
Yeah, of course.
You know, especially the last job. That's the most recent thing, right? I was good with it. I gave my 2 weeks notice. I trained the next guy. I'm doing well. And then I hear that the old board is still bringing my name up, talking bad about me. So I called my sponsor about it. He said, put it on paper. Put it on paper. And I knew he was going to say that. So I went and I met with him. And, you know, we sat in a Cracker Barrel for a good hour and a half. And the funny thing is, I love my sponsor. He's the most humble guy I know, man. Oh, God, I love him. And we got up afterwards, and he apologized to the couple that was sitting behind us because we were so loud. But, you know, what he told me, and this is why we got to run it by somebody else, right? And this is why we got to put it on paper. It looks different on paper than it does in our mind. And when we talk to somebody else, we get that input, right? He told me, you need to research the 5 to 7 stages of grief, because you were married to that job. Yeah. Man, and that's what I needed. That I needed that, you know? So it's a combination of doing all of these things to get healthy again, because I could fall backwards in it, right? We are rocketed into that 4th dimension. I could lose these dimensions daily. And it's got to start with the spirituality of it.
Oh, yeah. And what was it like for you that so obviously, you know, when you go pick up that white chip, and you talked a little bit about, so now, because obviously, and I'll let you say that, but what I'm hearing is like, I got to stop using, right? So I'm going to go do this program, but you went through trying to unmask the who is Jeff, because you had all these masks on. Now you got to take the masks off and figure out, you know, who's Jeff Deck.
Yeah.
What was it like going through that stage of before, when you were kind of doing the steps a little bit? You know, if you don't mind sharing that with us, you know, obviously now you've opened up to that part of your life. What was that like, and what do you feel like was the reason why you were like, I don't need to 100% do all the spirituality stuff? What was stopping you at that point? Because some people are getting stopped by that, and I think they'll learn from this.
Okay, so it was the content prior to investigation, right? The spiritual appendix, right? Page 568, Herbert Spencer quote, right? So because I was a Catholic schoolboy, born and raised, right? I had 2 quick stops in public school and high school, right? Everything else was Catholic school. Mass on the weekends, played sports for the Catholic Youth Organization. I had this whole concept about God, okay? And I wasn't going to hear all these people telling me how I'm supposed to think about God. I was just stuck on this religion thing of it, you know? And like today, right? I have a higher power today. I choose to call him God. You can't have him. Get your own. Okay? Now, I'm Catholic. I'm always going to be Catholic. Guess what? I married a Christian woman. Guess what? We go to Baptist church. Guess what? I've sponsored a Muslim. It's not about that.
That's right.
It's not about that today. It's a spiritual approach to staying clean and sober. Okay? And when I first got sober, you know, that time after I relapsed, those first 4.5 months before I drank again, I fell in love with somebody for the first time in my life. I fell in love with my son. Legitimately. And I couldn't believe that I put him in that danger. You know, so again, like you, I used my son at first. I used my son to stay clean and sober that kind of first year. And what happened was I wound up falling in love with my wife because I didn't love her at first. I used her to stay in Jacksonville. She was going to kick me out of umpteenth times. Yeah. So I fell in love with her too. But then I fell in love with the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, I would go in meetings, but I really wasn't going in meetings. Yeah. Okay? So I fell in love with the fellowship. I wanted to be around it. And that's what kept me sober for that first 1.5 years. And then I found out the second ex-wife had stepped outside of our marriage. And I immediately moved out. And at almost 2 years clean sober, I'm living in a sober living house. Pride and ego struck, man. Yeah. I was humbled, right? And because I was in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, because what happened was when I got a year sobriety, right, I started being of service. I became a chair captain of my home group, the sober softball, so people, kind of knew who I was, helping out any way I was. When I moved into that sober living house, the men and women put me on their shoulders, right? And I like to say that was my step 2, okay, with the principle of hope. They gave me hope that I was going to be okay. Okay, I had to drop out of college. I was almost a teacher. God knew he was doing that, and thank God I didn't become a teacher, right? They started giving me jobs, okay, because I needed to support myself fully now. They started leaving me envelopes in my mailbox without their names and had money in them, dropping off clothes, dropping off food. So in a way, to this day, and I hope it stays with me the rest of my life, and they'll tell you, you don't owe me nothing. No, I owe you guys. Mm-hmm. I owe you guys for saving my life. Y'all gave me that hope that everything was going to be okay. And for a short period there, Joe, a short period from, I would say, May of 2015 to about January of 2016, I actually started praying. I actually started asking God, you know why? Because I was in pain. God, get me out of this. It was those same damn foxhole prayers I used in my disease that I was using in sobriety. Yeah. Help me now. I'm in pain. The problem was it took me another couple years to realize it was me who put me in the pain. Mm-hmm. It was nobody else, right? I was turning my will and my life over to the care of everybody else and everything else around me instead of turning it over to God. Yeah. I was turning it over to her, him, and everybody. Mm-hmm. And it was just putting me in pain, man.
Yeah. And so let's say right now you were sitting in front of that same Jeff and you could tell him something, the guy who coming in and you're like, okay, you're sober now. What would you tell him?
You don't need a woman in your life.
Yeah.
You don't need a woman in your life. You need God. Because when ex-wife 3 walked out the door and I was, oh, God, it broke my heart. I loved that woman. And I didn't know what to do. What happened was my higher power is a sense of humor. I wound up moving into that same damn halfway house that I did at 2 years, and now I'm 4.5 years. And I remember crying on my knees and reaching out to her, email and a text and a, let's go to marriage, let's figure this out. And no. And, I found out why, and it kind of helped a little bit. And I would call my sponsor, she. And that's when he would tell me, man, I don't want to hear about her. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about you, man. And, I started doing the wrong thing right after that, and this is what you were talking about earlier. I started relying on other things to make me feel better that weren't alcohol and drugs, and that was a woman. Yeah. I started dating around town. Any cute AA girl I could hook up with, I was trying to hook up with in those 6 months after she left, and I did. And it was a poor example of a man who's trying to work a program of Alcoholics Anonymous with 4 or 5 years sobriety at time. And my sponsor called my ass out because he found out I wasn't telling him. And he said, I want you to stay in that damn house. You don't message, call anybody. You don't answer them when they call or message you. You get right with God first, son. And I listened to him. Yeah. And for about, I would say 8 or 9 months, I didn't date anybody. And I worked on myself with God.
Yeah.
And the rest is history, man. He put this woman in my life, and we have the same story where we put ourselves through that pain, my wife Samantha and I, and she was going through a divorce, man. Right after I got done with mine, and we've been part of the same home group since day one. Yeah. And I could relate. And guess what I did? I asked my sponsor if I should ask her out on a date. I asked my sponsor if we should move in. I asked my sponsor if we should get married. I asked my sponsor if I should buy a new truck, if I should buy I ran something by everybody, and I still do it to this day, man. Yeah. It's what y'all told me to do from day one. I'm actually doing it. Yeah. I want what you got, but I wasn't unwilling to do what you were doing. All right. Now I want what you got, and I'm going to do what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
What's cool about this, man? I love that you're very authentic. I mean, that's why it's called Let's Get Real, and you're getting real. You're sharing, and what's awesome about this is you put away the drugs and alcohol. We start working a program, and we still got us, man. And what I always say is, for me, especially, we're very similar. For me, it's more caught than taught. For me, like I'm hard headed. And it's like, okay, I go through it. I'm like, God, I got to call somebody. Even my wife, she's like, you call anybody yet? Now, today I notice it a lot sooner. When I'm spiritually fit and I'm working a program, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do on a daily habit, I'm doing my inventory, I notice it a lot quicker. But when I'm not and I don't notice it, it's like, why do I keep going back, man? I'm hard-headed. And I tell people, it's like, look, now we're on this path. It's a new way of life. Just because we're on this new way of life of sobriety doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. And sometimes we think, at least me, I thought coming into the rooms that I got to reach this place, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to get to this Rocky Mountain high place that I see because when I look in the rooms and I see the people in the rooms and I see them lighting up and I see them with their families and playing with the kids, I'm like, that's the place. Well, there ain't no place. You know what I mean? We're just on a journey. That's what I always say. It's a journey we're on. And on the journey, there's going to be rocks. There's going to be turns. But as long as you're not alone and you got people to say, hey, brother, I know you just stumbled over that rock and you're crying over your scraped knee and you're mad at the rock. Well, just next time go around the rock and thank you. And the great thing about what you had, even though you were going through stuff, you had people.
Yeah.
I heard two things. You had people around you and you had the willingness that when it got hard enough and it got bad enough, that you reached out.
That's right.
And you stayed sober. Yeah. Like the reality of, I don't care if anybody's life, if anybody was authentic and shared all the shit that they went through the first 2 years of life, we're all going through stuff. But are we going through it alone and are we staying sober?
That's right.
And then you kept your spirituality.
And I love the name of the show, right? Let's Get Real. And that's I get asked, it's a privilege to be asked to speak around town. I speak around town a lot and I do the steps around town a lot. I just did them 4 times this year around town, 4 different places. And, I tell on my ass. Mm-hmm. Listen, everybody has different stories and I need to hear everybody share, get to know them. I just look for one thing to take, but when I go to these speaker meetings and a man and woman is sharing, I don't hear one problem in sobriety. It's like, right. For me, right? Yeah. So I tell on myself, man, because I don't want anybody to do it like I did it those first 4.5 years. And the biggest thing I've learned here in sobriety, one of the biggest things is that whole thing from the 12 and 12, right? Rule 62, man. Mm-hmm. Don't take yourself so damn seriously. I embarrass the crap out of myself now, almost on purpose. Right. I want to, and these stupid videos I do. I love TikTok, right? I love putting Facebook videos. I
love them too. They're funny.
And I want people to see you can have fun. You mentioned the rock, dude. There's been times where I've tripped over things and went and drank over them because the cute girl from high school saw me. It's that stupid, right? I mean, so we have to put ourselves out there. Yeah. It's okay because it's all fear. Mm-hmm. Everything that we're talking about today, any kind of problems that we've had, it's fear. Right. That fear is behind every. You got your 7 deadly sins, right? And it's mentioned in 12 and 12, right? And you can remember them with the acronym PAGLs: pride, anger, greed, gluttony, lust, envy, and sloth. Fear is behind all of them. Yeah. We put these resentments on paper, and guess what? When we get to that 4th column, what word is always there out of those 5 words? Fear. Yeah. It's there. How do we tackle fear? How do I tackle fear? Seriously, I stepped to the other side of that crap. Yeah. I put on a dress for a roast of somebody 1.5 years ago and sang some kind of Grease song. I don't care. And it was a vertical dress, and I wasn't in good shape. I didn't look good. I didn't care. Right. I don't care anymore. You're either going to like me or you're not. Mm-hmm. What I care about is, does God like me? Am I doing what's right by God? And another thing, I don't like when people say, and this is just for me, right? Do the next right thing. I don't know what that shit is sometimes, excuse my language, right? So I try not to do the next wrong thing because I know what the next wrong thing is. Yeah. I really do. And that's the whole thing, like, I will not continue to live in these character defects that are continuing to hurt others, right? Mm-hmm. I know if I'm hurting somebody else, why do I continue to do that, right? Yeah. I need to fix those things, man. Right.
And the other thing too is there's 2 things I also notice you're saying is you're talking about, number 1, your spirituality with God. And then I also believe it's you love yourself today, and you don't like. I know for me, when I was seeking validation from other people, it was because I didn't love myself enough, and I needed you to tell me if I'm good. Yeah. Right. So even my wife, I realized, after we were married, and as funny as it sounds, I was sharing this in a meeting, and so many people were like, "Dude, I relate." And my wife asked me to wash the dishes. I said, "Hey, can you wash the dishes?" I heard her in my own mind say, "You ain't doing enough for me, and you're not a good enough husband." And you know what that was? Fear of not being good enough. Yeah. And every time when I talk to somebody, I get so mad because they're always pulling back. I'm like, God, it's always my damn fear, man. It's always my fear. And what I always say, number 1, is I give my fear to God, and I realize my fear is it always boils down to me feeling like I'm not good enough. It goes back to that, and it comes from childhood stuff. And what I always say is also about people liking, I struggle with that too. You know, we come into the program, especially newcomers, right? And they, you know, we come in, we don't know who we are. We're faced with our past. We're faced with the things that we did. Like for me, I looked at my amends list and I started thinking about all the amends I had. It was every person I've ever met in my life. Because there was not somebody that I met that I ever did anything good. I only met you, and if I took you out to the bar, it was because I knew you. I was a server, so I knew you put your money in your purse.
Sure.
And I knew you were going to go to the bathroom, and I was going to steal it from you, and I was going to help you try to find out who stole it from
That's
you.
right.
So it all, I didn't know who I was, so I come into the rooms, and the problem is, and I'd like you to share on this, is as we're doing the steps, I'm like, I got to look at my past now. I've been running from it, and I don't want to look at my past because I feel like that's who I am. You know, and a lot of times, whether you're in recovery or not, someone listen to this, you know, I think a lot of times our past uncovers our fears, uncovers our character defect. It helps us understand, and I was saying this with a sponsee, it's not who we are, it's who we don't want to become.
Right.
If we don't pay attention to why we did the things we did, I didn't do the things I did because of drugs and alcohol. I did it because I'm selfish, I'm self-centered, I want my own things, I'm manipulative, I have my own fears. That's why I did it. So what would you tell, you know, there's a lot of people who are afraid to look at their past, right? Because they're like, I don't want to open that up, man. That's who I am. What would you say to them?
Well, if I can, real quick, and I'm going to answer that, is that whole thing where I don't love myself. One thing I've incorporated into my morning prayer and meditation, I cannot even remember the last time I didn't do morning prayer and meditation. Okay? I just can't. Okay? I kind of got the same routine and get a coffee. I go outside 5-10 minutes. I always hug myself in the morning. That's that self-love. That's that self-care. I tell myself I love me. Okay? I do it every single morning. That's part of starting my day. Okay? I want to keep that there, right?
That's good.
So as far as your question goes, this is what I would say, right? For me, it's all in the steps. It's all in the inventory with a sponsor. I had to look at, like you, the wreckage of my past. I had to look at, and listen, it's 2022. There's a lot of literature and knowledge on my disease today, okay? And there is a clinical approach to it. The main problem, the alcoholic centers in the mind, page 23 of the big book. It's here. I got to fix this. I can't just come in here and not work on why I was like this or find out why. I need to research why I acted like this, right? I know that my father was 6'5", over 300 pounds. He was verbally, which was the worst part of it, but also physically abusive to me, my mother, and my brother. I know that a male family member sexually did things to me and had me do things to him. I know that this coach didn't play me the way he was supposed to play me. I know that this girl didn't like me the way she was going to like me. I got married when I was 21 to a woman, and that didn't work out. I got married, blamed. I never wanted to own everything that was happening in my life. I wanted to blame others, okay? I needed to learn in sobriety how to take ownership and stop blaming people, right? I heard this woman say, and I don't remember who it was, a long time ago, and I took that, right? Once we do our first 5th step with our sponsor, there should be no more column 2. There shouldn't be. What'd they do to me? No. Why am I acting this way?
That's right.
You know, I had to learn that because I was all about blame. I couldn't wait to do my first 4th step, Joe. Oh, you're telling me I'm going to put down all these things that people did to me? Blah, 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 blah. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It's not like that no more. You know, I had to clean up that wreckage. I had to see with a sponsor, right, why I owe this person an amends. Why? You know? But it's all in the step work, man.
Yeah.
It works. 1935, Bill Wilson gets sober, right? The big book is written by those first 100, published in 1939. There hasn't been one damn thing that has been proven to work, not only to keep somebody like me clean and sober, but to have me become a human being where I live life on life terms, right? And you know what's funny is, my favorite book other than the big book is the 12 and 12.
Right.
Bill Wilson writes that himself, Joe, in 1953. 14 years after it's published, 18 years when he's sober. My thoughts are he wrote that in 1953 for a couple reasons. Number one, in the big book, Step 6 and 7 only have one paragraph. He realized he has a shitload of character defects. And that's why there's like 12, 13 pages, right? But there's expansions on everything. For example, like the big book, step 11, he actually addresses it in step 10 of the 12 of 12. That's how important it is to practice prayer and meditation. You know, so we've researched this stuff. We read the literature. We go to meetings. People who don't go to meetings don't know what happens to people who don't go to meetings. Right. That's a direct quote from Grateful Mike Cheek. Right. He's awesome, right? And it's the truth, dude. Yeah. I need a little bit of everything. Again, I'm an addict. I want it. Mm-hmm. But I also know and have to remain humble. Yo, I don't want to graduate today. Mm-hmm. I don't. Yeah. I just want to be that normal guy. Right. I just have a little bit more experience than maybe the guy who has 1 year. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. And it's just life experiences. And it's crazy because, like, I know for me, when I first came into rooms and I looked at the steps on the wall and everybody talked about all this stuff, and I would say, I don't know, man. Because, like, you want me to talk about this and talk about that, and you just shared, like, I was molested when I was a kid, and I don't want to tell you that. So I remember when I first did my 4-step, and you probably remember Kenyatta. He was my first sponsor,
Kenyatta.
man.
I didn't know that. Oh, man.
Yeah, man. He was a guy, came into the room. I went to the men's meeting on Sunday morning at Alumni House, and I went there at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I come from Middle Eastern culture where men don't cry, men don't laugh, men don't hug. And I just get out of prison, you know, and all I know is I'm so scared, and this is the only thing I know that might work. Like, I didn't even think it was going to work. Like, I've said that before. Like, I didn't walk into AA like, oh, it's going to work. I'm here. I was like, this might work. Mm-hmm. And I got to try this, because if I don't try this, I don't have any other way. Like, I've tried, like, the weekend thing and, like, the only Monday and, like, maybe just do this and this. None of that worked. And if I mess this up again, I'm probably going back to prison the rest of my life, or I'm going to die. Right. And I still say that today. Like, I don't have a relapse prevention plan. If I relapse, I'm dead or end up in jail the rest of my life. And I remember when Kenyatta told me, he said, you know, one thing we do, you know, obviously when we come into these rooms, is I was afraid of my past, and I was afraid of all the stuff, and I did my 4-step, and I never wrote down that I was molested, right? I never wrote that down. And he said, hey, man, I want to ask you, you really want to stay sober? I said, yeah, man. He said, no, for real. Like, and you know, Kenyatta, man, he was like, I'm being serious, man. We were sitting at Alco House at Sunday morning before the girls' meeting, having some breakfast. And I said, I do. He said, well, if there's something you left off, whether I know it or not, you know it. And I promise you, if you're leaving something off this, I don't know if it's going to be today, next week, or next month, you're going to end up getting high over that thing. And I remember he said that, and I was like, okay, there's something. And I said it, you know, and he was like, that's it. We're freeing ourselves from this stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, we're so afraid to talk about this stuff. And we're so afraid to, you know, we come into the rooms, and this is what I always say. If you want it to work, it's going to work, man. You know, we come in this thing, and it's a simple program for complicated people.
That's right.
I mean, I have tried to come in and make the program do what I wanted it to do for me, right? Okay, 90 meetings in 90 days. Okay, what if I did 3 meetings today and none tomorrow, you know? Or we got to do the steps. Okay, we got to do the 4-step. And vigorously honest. I'll be vigorous honest about some of this stuff. Like, there ain't no middle road to solution.
No. And I love Kenyatta. Kenyatta would always say, man, I wake up every morning. I put on my gear every morning. I'm going to battle. Yeah. I love that stuff, right? Mm. But what you're talking about is the horse story, right? I heard this story when I was about 3 months sober. I went to an all-men's meeting at Alumni House, and this guy starts sharing, Joe, because everybody's like, oh, it wasn't, I drank because I'm not doing my 4th and 5th step. We hear that a lot. We really do, right? And this guy was like, man, I had this friend who had a friend, right? And he's Mr. White Chip. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. White Chip. And one day his friend asked his friend, you know, why do you keep drinking? What's going on? He's like, I ain't doing this 4th and 5th step. I got too much stuff. So the guy said, okay. Well, listen, I'm going to sponsor you, right? We'll go through the first 3. And then when you get to the 4th step, you know, we'll talk about it. The guy said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So they get to the 4th step, and the guy tells him to put all this stuff down on paper, right? Column 1. He goes, but that thing that you don't want to tell anybody, you put it down. You don't have to tell me. Put it down last, because it's only for your eyes. Mm-hmm. He goes, you know what? I could do that. I'll put it on paper. So he does it. They make that appointment. They meet for the 5th step. He goes through everything. And he was like, okay, I'm done. You know, he goes, no. Did you put that other thing down? He goes, yeah, but you told me I'm going to tell you. He goes, you went this far. Tell me anyway. Do you want to drink? If you drink, you're going to die. Just tell me. You're sick as your secrets. Yeah. And the guy goes, okay, I'm going to tell you. And he says, I slept with a horse. And And you know what the sponsor said to him? Me too.
All right. Yeah.
It's all pride and ego.
That's
There
right.
ain't a damn thing I've done that you haven't done. There ain't a damn thing that you've done that I haven't done. Where else can you go and talk about how much prison time we did
Right.
and it's okay? Where else can we joke around about previous STDs and it's okay? Go to church and do that shit. No, you get banned.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the joy of any 12-step program.
Mm-hmm.
We fit in finally.
That's right. It's the place you go to, man. And that's what I said when I walked into that men's room and there were 73 guys. I cried that day, man. I never forget it. I walked in, I get goosebumps just remembering that time because I was so scared, right? And I'm looking for a place like we just talked about it, and we'll kind of end with this as we go. You know, I was looking for a place to fit in. I've had these masks, you know, and of course when you're getting high, it's most of the time it's a solution to all the problems in your life. So which means you have no idea who you are anymore, you know, and I don't know who I am. I'm coming out of prison. I got about 80 felonies on my record. I got 2 years probation. I'm 26 years old. The only people that love me right now are my mom and dad because they got no other choice. And I don't even know if I'm going to stay sober or if my life's going to be like that guy in the 10 by 10 cell. And I'm thinking it might be, you know, I don't know. I don't want it to be for the first time in my life. So I'm in here and everybody's just sharing, and I see these dudes crying, and then Kenyatta's yelling at people, and then they say something at the end, man, if anybody doesn't have a sponsor. And I promise you it was not me because I did not want to raise my hand because I got pride and I was scared. So I just raised my hand and Kenyatta came up to me and same thing. He said, we gonna go to battle, man. And he gave me that fire that I still carry with me today. I always say that he always says, you know, we're in the trenches. We're warriors.
Yeah,
we're fighting together. And when he would tell me that stuff, it almost was like, okay, this is what this is. This is a place where I'll come in and everybody's here. You know, I think about why is this guy with 30 years sober coming here? Because he knows what the guy with one day is, and he's trying to give him some hope. And we're all here fighting the same battle. And I say this, you know, it's like going to high school. You got a zit on your face, and you're afraid to walk in a room because of your zit. But you look around, and everybody's got a zit, man.
That's right.
And in the rooms, we all got a bunch of zits, and we're trying to pop yours. You could pop ours.
You're damn Skippy.
And I promise you, man, it's a fellowship you will never. Like I say this all the time, and especially Jacksonville, we're so blessed around here, man.
Oh man.
But dude, it's a fellowship that when I walk in on Sunday morning, I don't even know how to explain it, man. I walk into my meetings or I get around my guys, even around family. I love my family, but I don't get the same feeling when I'm around. Like not my wife and my kids is different, but I'm talking about like cousins, aunts, uncles, mom, and dad. I can go to an event and it's great to be around them, or I can come to an event around recovery and I'm just like, I'm home.
Man,
You know?
unity, service, recovery. It's what's around our triangle.
Yeah.
Trust God, clean house, help others. I pray with my wife today. We pray with our kids today. We put God first. You know, there's some struggles right now in a couple areas of our life right now, not between me and her, but things going on. And guess what? The answer is always the same. Trust God. Trust God. Go help somebody.
Yeah.
Jim Sullivan, right?
Yeah.
Love Jim. You know what he told me early on? I went to a James Gang meeting. I was like 2 weeks sober. My first sponsor was Larry E. Love that guy. He walked me over to the gym. I was at Jim's trunk. He goes, oh, hey, Jeff, you want to have a bad day? Think of yourself. That's what he told me.
Yeah, it's so right.
And I passed that along to other people. Go help somebody.
Yeah.
Go help somebody.
Man, it takes your mind, and it's amazing because we're still selfish. It doesn't matter, and that's why I always say, like, I love the analogy of like we think we're gonna get to this place, and it's not, man. It's just a daily thing, and it's like I'm still selfish and self-centered, but when I'm not thinking of me and I'm just out and I'm helping somebody, thinking of others, thinking of my wife, thinking of my kids, my employee, whatever the case is, my problems are nothing at that point.
Nothing.
My problems are like it's simple. And it gives me purpose today. I always say, like, you know, like even the shirt, if I hide my story, I hide God's glory. Everything in my past was because I wore that mask. I wasn't valuable. Somebody said to me the other day, and he was saying, man, one thing when I talk to you, I feel transparent. I was like, the only reason you feel that way is because I never was. And I'm afraid of not being that transparent guy. So I'm like, kind of like you, I'm just trying to give it all out there and just be honest and open and like goofy or whatever, because I don't want to be that guy that's not transparent anymore. Because I know what that feels like. I don't even know who I am anymore, and I lose who I am, and then I lose everything else, you know?
Yeah, you're lucky you can wear that shirt on. I'm actually on a break from work. I don't usually wear a collar and Dockers. I ain't that dude. My hat's in the back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let's end with this, man. You know, I mean, every time, you know, somebody comes on, what's your hope? You know, if you were talking to somebody right now that's listening to this, because people come here for hope. Like I listen to people that listen to this, and they always say, thanks, man, I heard something today. You know, and what do you want people to hear from your story, from what you've been through, just to give them one last thing to end with, man?
Man, we do recover. It's possible. There's never, I can't do it. There's millions of us out there, and everybody who knows somebody who has a problem with alcohol and drugs. You know, we all know what fentanyl's doing to us. It's 2022. It's in everything. Pills on the street to weed. We're dying out there. There is a way out.
Yeah.
Reach out to us. Go to that first meeting. Make that call to a center. Ask for help. It works. It really, really does.
Yeah. If it works for two schmucks like us, man, it's got to work for somebody, man.
I haven't called myself a schmuck in a long time. I'm going to use that word all day long. I love it. Yeah.
All right, Jeff. Hey, man, I appreciate you being here, brother.
But thank you.
Of course, man. It brought so much value. Even just us talking, this is what I love about it. And hopefully that, if there's one person, guys, listen, if you've heard this, like I always say this, there's somebody that might need to hear this. If you want to share this with somebody, if you liked it, share it with somebody that might need to hear it. Obviously, Jeff, thanks again for being here, guys, and thanks for letting us share.